an
Sure.
introduction of, and then maybe slide into talking about Radio Mankato and what that's all
Okay.
about.
Well, my name is Bruce McGirdy. I'm the general manager at Radio Mankato. We have 7 radio stations, 8 websites, and Linder Digital, which is the stuff that you find on your cell phone or your websites or those sorts of things. So there's a variety of media products. I came home from 4th grade and where Mrs. Speck had Radio Day. And I absolutely fell in love with it. The minute that Mrs. Speck introduced it to me, and I came home from 4th grade, I said, "Mom, I want to work at a radio station when I grow up," and I never changed my story. So I started in 1983, 37 years ago, and actually, yeah, 37 years ago. Judges don't give sentences that bad, I don't think. But here's the deal. Radio's changed a lot. When I started, I was a disc jockey and we were flipping vinyl. And at least I to you guys, I don't have to explain what that is. I work with some people who I said like 45s and they're like, the beer? I mean, like they don't quite, know what to do with that. So, I mean, and at that point in time, there was ownership. Most radio stations were community radio stations. And you owned an AM and an FM. That was about all you were allowed to own. Fast forward, I moved a lot in my early career. I wound up in Grand Forks, in Gillette, Wyoming, in Grand Forks again. Eventually finished my on-air career at 93X in the Twin Cities, which is a rock station. At that point, I kind of had a bit of a crisis of faith because I was how do I tell my then 1-year-old son that you can't say these words, but Daddy gets to say them on the radio? And so I joined a group of radio stations called Children's Radio Network and was their corporate creative director for 4.5 years. We moved a lot again and just basically fixing properties and moving them on. And these were all very community-oriented radio stations. I've only done, 2 stints in corporate radio, 93X, which was owned by Entercom at the time, and then Children's, which was owned by a company called CD Broadcasting. Virtually everybody else I've worked for, I have very purposely have chose local broadcasters, people who understand the business. There are some who believe radio is just big business and should be treated as such. And I just believe there's a much better purpose for radio than just that. So from there, I decided, we have to come off the road. I had little kids at that point in time. They're all grown now, and I went into sales and management about 25 years ago, and did not move as much. It was nice to have some stability. Got all the kids raised, and about a year and a half ago, I was contacted would you like to run Radio Mankato? And looked at it. I typically had been approached by multiple people in the past, and I just didn't take the interviews because I really liked the people I was working with. But this one seemed special, and so I joined here. And like I say, a little over a year ago, and I just love the idea that this is one of the largest group clusters in Minnesota. There are 7 radio stations all under one roof. Most people have their 1 or 2 favorites. There's actually a rule in branding that the human mind can't hold on to more than about 3 products in any given category. For example, Mike, if I said, name as many toothpastes as you can in 10 seconds, go, you would typically be able to name 3, maybe 4. So when you have 7 in one building, that's difficult. So we have Minnesota 93, Hot 96.7, KXLP, Magic 100.5, KRRW, North Star Country, the Fan Mankato, and KTOE, which is a lot of people know us for our news and information. So those are the stations at this point, and it's been a really interesting year as I kind of learn a new community and learn new stuff on the way. I mean, radio has changed so dramatically from those days of flipping 45s. By the time I got to Grand Forks, we had moved to music being delivered as a CD product. Most people still remember those, and they're not even a primary product anymore. But CDs, I mean, right now, everything in the building has moved to computers. I'm not even sure if we have a CD player in the building. Everything that you hear on the air comes off of a computer. The music does. The big liner voice guy that's in between the songs, that's on a computer. Our announcers are live and local, but there are times, for example, that they may have to run down the hallway to the bathroom or for something, something else is going on. They can actually pre-record that, put it in on the spot, and walk away for 20 minutes. It's very possible to do. And so you don't really ever know. I mean, these guys are so good at it. I had a promotion last year. I had to be with, some people know him as Stunt Monkey. His name is Jeff. But I had to be with Jeff, and we were driving the car, and we were listening to Hot 96.7. And I'm like, I know you're not live because you're sitting in the car next to me here, but you couldn't tell. I mean, it is remarkable how, connected they are, how well that works. But then also every commercial, all of that plays off of a computer as well. It used to be we would use what's called a cart. A cart is kind of like an 8-track tape. And they were awful. They were just horrible to use. They would tighten up after a certain amount of time and break, and you had to rewind them. And the technology now has allowed us to do so many more things. It has allowed us to free up our people to be able to go do, instead of, being able in, this amount of time to this amount of time is your board shift, you actually could be, record something and then go do an interview somewhere else in the building in another studio, so that they can actually be doing sometimes 2 and 3 things at once. Along with that, I mean, there are some things that change. The technology has changed. I would say the big break, there were 2 or 3 key things in radio that changed. I would say 1996 was the biggest of them. It used to be you could own an AM and an FM. And then they said you could own an AM and an FM and an FM. And then in 1996, they said, yeah, own whatever you want. You can't own a whole market. Mostly you have to have a certain amount of crossover, but you can own whatever you want. And that's when big corporate radio started getting into the game. And it's difficult sometimes, because I just believe that a radio station it's necessary for a radio station to thoughtfully inform, thoughtfully entertain, and thoughtfully serve the community that they're in. And a lot of big corporations, they just don't see that. They just don't perform that way. They are there because it's a good business. And what happens here, I'll describe this. I'm driving in Missouri. I'd gone down to see some family, and I got in the car and I'm punching radio stations, as I always do. I want to hear what other people are doing. And I happened to wind up on an iHeart radio station. It's the largest of all of the radio corporations. I think they own 1,600 at this point, which is a lot of radio stations. They had a bit when we stop down and start talking and are talking about, here's what's going on in the community, and we call that a bit. They stopped down to do a bit, and it was brilliant. It was about a pet, and they had gone to the adoption shelter, and it pulled at your heartstrings. It made me want to go have a dog, and I haven't had a dog in 25 years. And I thought, wow, that was impressive. That was really something. And I felt really good about iHeartRadio for the rest of the day. The next morning, in a different hour, so let's say that was 7 a.m. The next morning in the 8 o'clock hour, the exact same bit came on. And I don't mean like, hey, they re-talked about it. I mean, they picked up the file out of one day, they transferred it into the computer into the next day, and then they did the exact, and I felt betrayed. I felt like, you must think I'm stupid, that I can't even tell the difference between, just because it was good content. They were counting on me not listening twice. And if you teach me that, I will simply stop listening twice, which I then shut it off and moved on to another station that had something more to offer. So we just do believe in live and local. Now we do repeat some programming. For example, there are some shows that we play during one part of the day, and we know that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, there'll be a different set of listeners, and it's still of interest. So we use the show again. We'll use programming again. Not every single piece of programming comes out of this building. That is, especially in our news talk program, in our music programming, it's all out of this building. We do everything. We pick the records, we put them in the computers, we do all of the announcing, we do all of that is here. So, but our news talk, we are live and local about 13 hours a day. Then in the evening, we will pick up things like Dave Ramsey. People are really familiar with Dave Ramsey. And here's the reality. He's really, really good. And I could never afford to have a guy of that kind of talent here. I mean, we just couldn't afford it. So there are times in what I would consider outside prime time where you want to have really good performers, really good talent, fill in those times. So we will pick up some syndicated programming. Yeah.
I was wondering, Bruce, you mentioned that sometimes you'll take a bit and put it somewhere else. Do you introduce it as being from, we talked to, Dave Ramsey yesterday afternoon or something, that's what he had to say?
No, and actually now, and the reality is the ones we really like to pick up, if we can get them, are the ones that are actually being done live. When you listen to Dave Ramsey, you're picking it up, more as a live product. And the overnight guys, I mean, in overnight radio, I started doing overnights back in 1983. I was the midnight to 6 guy. And it is a long, miserable shift, but there are guys who thrive on that. And we've got Coast to Coast, which is on, and they're kind of like conspiracy theories and all kinds of weird, I mean, they have just the most bizarre conversations. If you're ever awake at 2 a.m, punch it up. It's actually pretty entertaining to listen to. But those guys are live and they take phone calls, and you can, so we try to have, as much live product as we can. It's just not out of our studios. Now on the weekends, there are some pre-recorded things, some things that are created, but in between those, we still want to have local news, local sports, local weather, things that tie us back to this community, because we know that there are things that just have to be done. In addition, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had that bad storm. Mary, was that down your way?
Yeah.
Yeah. So during that storm, we stopped down. When we found out it's a severe weather storm, we shut everything else off, and we have 3 buttons in the back, and you push the 3 buttons up, and now you are live and local with one set of announcers on all 7 radio stations. And we do that for multiple reasons. One, we know that not everybody changes stations when there's really important information to come across. Second, you can then take all of your talent and push them into one room, because it's really hard doing weather reporting. One person's looking up this, another person is looking up, well, how should you be reacting? A third person is working the phones to talk to our meteorologist, and we have a meteorologist on staff. I'm gonna get a drink of tea, sorry, hang on. So we flip these switches and it's all on. So that's one key reason, probably the main reason. But if you were listening to KTOE that night, you may have noticed that right in the middle of it, it stopped. We got struck by lightning. We have their towers, the 3 towers right out here. And that happens. These towers take lightning strikes all the time. And so if one gets shut off the air, there are still 6 others that can pick up, still have the information so people have someplace to go. Now we were able to reset it and got it all turned back on. It took 5-10 minutes or so, because, there's technology involved. But we do that very specifically for a reason. We talked for a couple hours. And it was interesting because there's times where I think to myself, okay, do we need to do this? And over and over and over. Because up here, at our studios, we had lightning, we had rain, but it wasn't that bad. We saw no hail. We did, I went outside several times just to go spotting, and I'm like, they're saying it's bad. And we had somebody on Facebook. I don't know if you guys are doing the Facebook thing, but somebody lit us up and basically said, you know, boy, you know, they're on the radio just talking for 2 hours here about how bad this storm's going to be. There's going to be 50 and 60 and 70-mile-an-hour winds. There's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 inch hails. There's going to be tornadoes. It's like, oh, give me a break and just start playing my music again. Well, one of our other announcers jumped in to engage, because you can't ignore social media, and just said, hey, this is our public duty. We are here to serve the communities we are. And while maybe it's not bad where you are, it is bad, I assure you. And so please just be patient. In a little while, regular programming will come back. She replied about a half hour later and said, yeah, I might have spoke a little too soon. My power went out. And when I finally got a chance to go outside and look, the tornado had come right by a half a mile from her house, snapped all the poles off, and she was without power. So she goes, sorry about that. I mean, and it's a reminder that people, when things are really bad, you can get information from a cell phone, but it doesn't always have, one, that reassuring human touch. And it also doesn't always have the most updated information, or you don't know how to interpret the information that you're finding on a cell phone. I mean, is this accurate? Is this, so the radio is kind of that safety net. That, and you know, the towers I was talking about, almost all of the cell signals are based off of radio towers. They're on some kind of a tower, and when they take a lightning strike, their electronics go bad too. So it's just one of those things that we take very, very seriously. And when there's a tornado on the ground, we are just going to stop down and talk, and we're going to work our way through it and figure it out. So I'm kind of going on and on, but that to me is, I mean, there are certain things that a local radio station simply has to do.
And I think, you know, as a guy who grew up in this.
Mike, you're on, you're muted.
Oh, shouldn't be.
No, I can hear him.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait. Hang on. Try now.
Okay, can you hear me now, Bruce?
Now I can hear you now.
Okay, well,
sorry.
As a guy who grew up in Mankato, you know, KTOE is where we always turned if there was bad weather, because we knew there was going to be somebody on live. And even when I worked at the theater department up at MSU, when the clouds were starting to roll in, we tuned into KTOE to find out what was going on. In many cases, that's where we found out if there were in a tornado warning, which of course kicks in so many other things that we have to do if we've got a live audience in one of the theaters. And the other facet of the community journalism for me is when I worked at the Free Press, there were 2 other locations that we listened to make sure we were getting all of the news. One was KEYC's 6 o'clock report, and then KTOE News. We would always tune into that to find out, okay, we've still got 2 hours to get something together. People are going to have heard it, you know, 12 hours ago on KTOE. We have to have it as well.
Right. So radio, to me, probably one of the most powerful things about radio is, one, it's intrusive. It gets into your head whether you want to know it or not. In fact, I don't know whether you guys are aware, but radio is the #1 reach media in the United States right now. More people listen to the radio than any other media, more than cell phones, more than television, more than newspapers, magazines, billboards, anything else. They spend more time. So let's play a game just for fun. In 1963, when I was born in December, so 2 weeks earlier, JFK had been shot, and the Beatles had been on the Ed Sullivan Show. And that year, about that time, 93% of people listened to the radio on a weekly basis. So now fast forward, it's all these years later, 56 years later. We have Pandora, we have Spotify, we have websites, we have Sirius XM satellite radio, we've got YouTube, and we've got Zoom, and we've got all these different things. Take a guess, what percentage of the population listens to radio on a weekly basis?
I know the answer, so I'm not going to say.
Take a guess, Mary, it'll be fun.
I would say 60 to 70%.
Yeah, it's 93%. Same thing. It went down, it goes down when times get really good. Like in 2005 and 6, it dropped to, and the economy was good, it dropped to about 92%, as I recall. But then during the recession of 7, 8, 9, it went back up to 94%. So, I mean, it's everywhere. It's free. People ascribe friendship to the people they see at the radio station. Here's a true story. When people say, well, what do you mean they ascribe friendship? So I was a morning guy at a station called XL93 in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I'm newly married. I have my beautiful new wife, and we're walking through the mall. And I was known as Michael McGirdy then. One of my grandsons is now named Michael McGirdy, which I just am thrilled about. But so we're walking through the mall, and this couple walks up to us with their new baby. And they're like, hey, Michael, we had our baby. It came out breech, and it was like this. And they're like telling me all of this information. I'm like, oh, wow. And it was really personal and like detailed. And I'm like, wow. And finally they walk away, and my wife goes, how come you didn't introduce me? And I'm like, I don't know who they are. They heard me every day on the air. They had met me at promotions, but you know, you couldn't remember everybody. But to me, I was their friend. And I always return the favor. It's like, I like making new friends, and it was fun to hear about a baby. I could perhaps have been spared the details, but you know, whatever. But that's, you know, when you start talking about, you know, Dan and Sully in the morning, or Ashley, or, you know, Barry, or any of these people, they go, oh, I know who they are. I listen to them. Or, you know, oh, there's that Talk of the Town with Lisa, or Logan does this. I mean, and you kind of start knowing even what time of day it is based on who's on the radio. And this has been going on for almost 100 years now. Radio is still incredibly viable as a form of communication. People tend to, you know, we're not as sexy as we used to. We're 100 years old. You know, everybody wants to talk about what's on their phone, but I think an awful lot of what's happening on a phone is not entirely healthy. I don't know whether you guys have had this experience where you're sitting talking to somebody and they're doing this while you're talking. They're like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's after a while, it's like, how do you connect with that? And so you stop trying. And whereas with radio, I mean, I still will walk into restaurants, and you eavesdrop, you listen, whatever, and you'll hear people talking about, oh, did you hear what they said this morning? Or I heard this story on the radio that, and it's really kind of fun. We have clients who will tell us all the time, yeah, somebody came in because they heard my radio ad, and you know, and what's weird is radio ads are more effective when you run a local radio station, because they are viewed as local information. It's just more information. It is not necessarily viewed as an intrusion. Whereas if I'm listening to a Pandora or YouTube or whatever, I'm like, come on, where's that button so I can skip to the next thing? A lot of times, you know, people just listen to it as, oh, I didn't know that was going on over there. I'll have to check that out later. And it's locally relevant information. This was probably one of the big switches. So I told you 1996 was a change in the industry. And then I want to say it was around 2006. Yeah, probably 2005 or 6. We were starting to look at radio as an industry. And we said, you know, the world's changing. I mean, in 2007, you had Facebook, Twitter, both were invented. There were a whole bunch of new technology things coming. And we redefined what radio was. Radio was always just this box sitting on the counter or in the dashboard of your car. And I will tell you, if that's all radio is that dashboard of the car, then yeah, we're going to be a dead industry. We redefined radio instead to say this is locally produced audio delivered in a variety of fashions. I don't know whether you guys are aware of it, but you can get any of our stations, all 7 of our stations. You can get us on air. You can find us online. Go to ktoe.com, click live. You can get us on your cell phone. You can download the app. You can get us on your Alexa device if you have one of those. You just say, Alexa, play KTOE live, and you're off to the races. So we're delivering it in a variety of different ways. We've just started to develop something called podcasts, which are, and they can take a variety of different things. If you ever listen at 1 o'clock on KTOE, we're developing some podcasts. One of my favorite is from the Blue Earth County Historical Society, where all they do is tell stories from history. It's called Surrounded by History, and they just tell stories for a half an hour. It's about 20 minutes actually, but it's a lot of fun, and it's local information, but it's pre-recorded and it's played back. But that also allows us to take that same pre-recording, put it online, and you can listen on demand anytime you want. So radio is not just this ephemeral thing that is here and gone. Oh, I wish I could have heard that, or boy, I missed that. I wish I could pause it and go back. Well, now you can go find the podcast and listen to that as well. So those are, that's when we kind of made that mental switch that radio is now just audio, locally produced audio, delivered in any way that somebody wants to listen to it. It really changed a lot of the rules, but it didn't change who we are. I mean, we want to make a difference. When COVID came out, we changed programming in 2 days. I mean, it was, here's a show, let's pick that up. Here's something, let's pick that up. I mean, we started to talk about it. We would have, our news coverage changed dramatically. We actually added a guy in the afternoon in order to be able to, and we were fortunate to have had him on staff. He had come to us recently, Darren, but he wasn't there every day. He was just kind of filling in when we needed. And I'm like, can you be here every afternoon? He goes, sure. And so we made some changes to adjust for the changing landscape, because we found news, especially during those first few weeks, by the time you got to the next morning, everything had changed. So, and that's one of the advantages of local radio as well. Radio is intrusive and it looks forward. Newspaper is basically reporting on here's what happened. It's a look back. Both are valuable. I prefer the looking forward version. I find it more interesting. If you think about what an announcer does all day long, all they do is tell you, here's what's about to happen. Here's what the weather's going to be. Here's what song is coming up. Here's who we're going to talk to next. Here's what's going to happen. And they just tell you, here's what's about to happen in your life to give you a little more preparatory time to deal with it. And I can't tell you how many times over all these years that it's like, oh, I hadn't even looked out. I'm glad somebody told me it was raining because I didn't know. Better take a coat. But
say, Bruce,
yeah,
give you a chance to take a drink of your beverage. What would you say is perhaps in the last 5 years, or maybe talk about tying in with social media a little bit more, because you talk about you had to have that box sitting on your counter to listen. Now there are so many different ways to connect with an audience.
I will tell you, I do have a bias. I mean, I feel social media is wildly unhealthy. I don't think it's good for America. I mean, or the universe in general. I grew up the son of a Methodist pastor who would say things like, the fastest way to misery is comparison. And people will look at their social media and everybody puts all the best stuff of their whole life on their social media. They don't tell them about the bad days. But I spend, time looking at that. Well, I don't have that life or that life or that life. And you compare your life to theirs, and it's a quick way to misery. And I don't think it's healthy. What I do love about radio is it's community, it's involvement. If you're doing it right, you're talking with somebody, not just at somebody. Now, I will tell you, there are some announcers who do talk at people. That still happens. But the best are interactive. I like social media from the standpoint of being able to gather feedback and information. It is, if you can find reputable sources. I mean, and for example, ktoe.com pushes everything out to Facebook as well. So you can find it online. You can find it on our Facebook page. All of our sources are, if the story is either locally produced by our 2 news people, or it comes from the Minnesota News Network, or it comes from the AP. Those are the only places that you can have it from. We are not into like investigatory news or anything like that. We're here to say, here's what the police told us. Here's what we found out from the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I mean, it is just, passing the information through. I don't want lots and lots of spin on it. Now, on Facebook, of course, once you push it out there, everybody's got their own point of view. The world has taught us to be very polarized. It's either this way or this way, and they ignore the 10 positions in between or more. And so it's gotten really frustrating that, everybody's a news person at this point. Now, here's the other upside though. Sometimes we hear about a news story. I mean, for example, I'll go back to the storm a couple of weeks ago. We had somebody, because of cell phones, went outside, took a picture of the tornadoes, and we had it, to which, of course, my response is, what are you doing outside? But, we tell you, it's like, how Minnesotan of all of us. So like, oh, they said on the radio, there's a tornado. Let's go look. I'm like, yeah. So
my husband used to do that.
it is
I'd
wildly.
be in the basement and I'd yell up and I'd say, if you blow away, not my fault.
On the other hand, it is nice to have some pictures and some firsthand reporting. We're able to get, we've always been able to get people on the phone, and you'll still hear that, where we'll take call-ins from listeners. Hey, we saw a 1-inch hail, we saw a 3-inch hail, whatever. And those are good. We also have made friends with the authorities and weather spotters. And by the way, we also have a staff meteorologist. He works in another city, but he's got all of his computers, and they work in their bunker, and they can actually tell you things of what's going on based on radar images that we may not see because we don't have a spotter in the right place. So that's handy too. And so we'll get on the phone with Mace every once in a while, either Mace or Corey. But
well, one thing social media or the internet has allowed you is a visual to go along with your oral story.
I will say I prefer websites more than social media. I think you can still have all of the, here's the presentation of information, here's, the video, the pictures, the whatever you want. And if it's on a website, it has far more control over it. There are some folks on social media who do get a little nasty, and we have a couple of rules. I mean, if you drop an F-bomb, we're going to delete your comment. I mean, nobody needs to come to our social media pages to be abused, and I'm not interested in that. So, but mostly we let people say what they want to say, I mean, if they don't have to agree with, I don't, mostly we just, all right, you get to own what you said, because a lot of times if they say something unpopular, other listeners will light them up. I mean, there's just too much drama in all of that. So when it comes to the social media thing, I will be curious to see if it sticks for the next 20, 30 years. It depends on how unhealthy people want to be.
I like it because you can keep in contact with people where you lived before.
I have 7 grandkids. I totally get that. I love being able to go, oh, look what Charlotte's doing today. But I dislike that I've got to have so many, so much business stuff on it. I've actually considered opening a second account and making that, if you are not blood relative, you are not invited, and just making that a whole separate thing. I think that might be a better way to do it, because I love, like you said, being able to see. And my 91-year-old dad, he's got one too, and he likes that same deal. I get to see the relatives. But social media is kind of like Las Vegas. There you go. You can go and you can have a great time. If you go looking for trouble, you will find it without much trouble. If you kind of stay on the main routes and don't go looking for trouble, you're just going to have fun. So there you go. There's my weird analogy for the day. What questions do you guys have?
I'm glad to hear that Darren is, because I listen, KTOE is my wake up call. 6 o'clock in the morning, my radio comes on, and he would be there with the news while Ashley was having her baby.
Right.
And of course, that was exciting to hear all about when she had her baby and all of this stuff. And I was anxious to have her back again because she's very local and up locally, and actually her dad's my accountant, you know. And
Oh, no kidding.
I could relate to her, and but all of a sudden Darren was gone, and something went on that weekend that I did not hear, and all of a sudden she was there and he was gone, and I'm going like, oh, I wonder what they did with Darren.
And we like Darren a lot. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But it's also one of those where, I mean, when you're looking for personalities for times of day, you have to look at, does it fit with team? Does it fit with audience? And while I like, Dan and Sully, and they did just fine with Darren, to have a female perspective is really valuable. Something, because otherwise you get a bunch of guys in a room, they're going to talk about golf or football all the time. And it's like, there are other things. Come on, guys,
Well, I enjoy having, I really do like having her on there. I just was worried about where Darren went to.
Well, and he is on in the afternoon, every afternoon now. So, and he jumps in.
I heard, because there must be some of his afternoon ones that end up played, I think it's Sunday mornings.
So
like recordings of
right.
He does, and he does a nice job interviewing people.
Those are, there is an FCC function. We're governed by the Federal Communications Commission. And so they want to make sure, and this is one of those things that happen because of big corporate radio. I mean, all these radio stations, all these years function like we do. And they gave just tons of time to local news and commentary and helped the community do all these things. Well, big corporate came in and they said, we don't have to do any of that. And so the FCC stepped in and said, oh, no. You have to give at least 20 to 30 minutes a week to news and events and this kind of information. So even though we spend 13 hours a day talking about nothing but local stuff, we still have to do these interviews that run on Sunday mornings, and Darren does a lot of those, and Ashley would do some as well.
See that those I tend to miss. I may be on there sometimes because a lot of times I'm at something in Mankato or something like that, and so I don't necessarily hear them. So I kind of enjoy hearing some of those on Sunday mornings.
You may hear, now I will tell you, news cycles tend to go from noon to noon. So for example, Darren will be developing stories in the afternoon, and she may be using those stories in the morning because still people haven't heard about them. And then there may be something big that happened overnight, in which case we will use those up till about noon, and then we're trying to find new material again. So it's kind of a noon to noon news cycle. But and obviously, if something is really big and fully developing and those sorts of things, I was not a news guy. I've done almost every job at a radio station. I have never been a news guy, though I do find it interesting.
So now you said something about are Ashley and Darren the only two news people for the whole thing?
Right. Now, that's not entirely true. For example, Lisa, who does Talk of the Town, she does mornings on Minnesota 93. So she's there, but she's got a degree in journalism and has great interest in news, but she has approached it more from the long form version of news. What's the interview like? And she's been doing some amazing things. Anything from, I love the bird guy. She interviews this bird guy, and I don't know why I find that. They used to call my dad Birdie McGirdy because that's our last name. And but she interviews this bird guy, and I just find it fascinating. Otherwise she'll do things that it's not just sound bites. And I have real frustration with sound bites in the news because you can take things out of context so easily. Whereas this is long play. In fact, one of the things when I first got here, one of the changes I really wanted to make, Talk of the Town was at 1 p.m. and it was a half hour long. And I said, oh my gosh, this is a treasure. And so Pete left and Lisa took over, and she was catching on very quickly. And she says, I'm having a hard time. I don't know what to do. And I said, what's going on? Because usually the hard part of a long play talk show is that it's hard to fill space. I mean, 20 minutes to 30 minutes of talking is hard to do. And she said, I'm booked out 6 weeks to 2 months right now. I've got so many people who want to be on the show. And I said, oh my gosh, we have demand. And so we moved the show from 1 p.m. to 11 a.m., which is a much better slot for it. And that way we could give her an entire hour.
Yeah.
And do you like that? We didn't get any complaints.
I do, because I'm more likely to hear it at 11 o'clock than I am at 1.
I agree. I think I tend to come back from lunch and I want to get sleepy or something. So, but she, and here's the really interesting thing. My assumption was she would cut down her lead time to about 3 weeks. That because you can now have twice as many guests. Nope, still booked out about 6 weeks. It's just more people realized there was ability to be on the show. And this is a live local talk show. And it's been a little challenging during the COVID thing because we're having to do more and more of it on the phone as opposed to live and in person, which is our preference. But that's how we're following the rules and trying to be, we're doing this instead of doing it live, we're doing it on Zoom. So.
Hey, Bruce, what do you think, what effect you mentioned podcasts earlier?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was called talk radio, and we only listened to it if our parents had it on and we couldn't get out of the car. Now it's called a podcast, and everybody wants to sit and listen in the long form.
For starters, let me tell you about polyester, okay? 1970s, when I was growing up, we all had these pants and they were awesome. You could take them off and throw them into a ball into the corner, and you could pick them up the next morning and you could put them on, not a wrinkle. But they called them polyester. Fast forward, and then we decided we didn't like polyester. It wasn't popular anymore. So, we went back to cotton and wool and all these things that weren't nearly as nice. Fast forward to 15 years ago? Somebody said, we found this brand new thing. It's called microfiber. Microfiber is polyester. That's what it is. So what they've basically done is, the original podcasts were on radio. Podcasting is a local talk show. It's a talk show. How we choose to deal with that, I don't see it as cutting down because I've seen the numbers. If you look at added up all of the people who are listening to podcasts, you're at maybe 15%. It's not as many people as you think. 93% of people listen to the radio. But I would suggest that KTOE is essentially one big 13-hour podcast followed by another, 11 hours of Dave Ramsey podcast. They've renamed it something else to say it's talk, it's conversation. And what we have the significant advantage of, frankly, is we're immediate. Like we can talk about the things that are going on here today. If you're going to do a podcast, and by the way, we generate 1, 2, 3, 4. We generate 4 in this building alone. If you're going to talk about what's happening today, you've got to go build it. You've got to mix it. You've got to produce it. You have to upload it. The quickest you can get that done is maybe 2 to 3 hours, as opposed to flip on a mic and let's talk about the storm that's driving across southern Minnesota. Turn on a mic and say, here's what's going on with people protesting here in town. Or the governor is on, boom, and he's live in St. Paul. You can't do that in podcasting. We're live and immediate. Now, does podcasting have its place? Absolutely. For talking about historical things, podcasting is to some extent the newspaper of radio. It is things looking backwards. It is, here's what's happened. Here's what one of the podcasts that I did for a while, it was called Elder and Young. And I like the idea. I played elder, and then I just had somebody who was younger than I was on. It was only okay. I wish it could have been developed more, but there was just no time. But it was this comparison of generations, and I think it's a good, healthy conversation. But there comes a point where podcasts have a place, and we're creating them, and we think they're awesome, but they're not forward-looking. And I think that is still what radio's strength is. So, oh, and by the way, Mike, and I don't mean to seem like I'm jumping on you, but here's been my experience. When I got in 1983, I was really worried for my job. I mean, somebody invented cassettes. Radio's gonna die because we don't need a radio anymore. Oh, they invented 8-track tapes. Radio's over. They invented television, by the way. When they invented television in the 50s, radio's done. We're never nobody's gonna listen to that anymore. They invented CDs. They've invented Spotify, Pandora, Sirius XM. I've been hearing this for 37 years. By the way, they don't make cassettes anymore. You couldn't buy one if you wanted one.
No, they don't.
And radio's still here. And it's because it still has a place of connecting with the human heart and the human mind. It's a real live person on the other end that you can call and talk to, that you can interact with, that you can and they're talking about things in your own community that you care about. And there isn't going to be a podcast that can do that. Now, the podcasts we're producing, for example, and I really do recommend, it's called Surrounded by History, and it's the Blue Earth County Historical Society, Mondays at 1:00. It's just, Jessica Potter hosts it for us. And I don't mean to sound like I'm gushing, but oh my gosh, it's really good. And I like history. And she'll talk about, hey, there's this cannon that used to be down in Lincoln Park. And one night, these boys decided to fill it with gunpowder and make it explode. It broke out 283 windows in the neighborhood. I mean, she goes off on all of these really great stories that, I mean, I drive by Lincoln Park on my way home every single night. And I'm listening to that podcast and I went, oh, there it is. I mean, it changes your perspective. So I think there's a lot of value in podcasting, but I don't think it serves the same function as a radio. So, any other questions? I am strongly opinionated, by the way. I'm not suggesting you have to agree with me.
Yeah.
I had a guy tell me years ago, he was a client, and I went in the defense of radio because, again, this one, I believe, let me think. I think that was Radio is Dead because of CDs. So this is quite some time ago. And I just, here's my argument. And he looks at me and he kind of pauses for a little bit. He goes, you're a good sales guy. If you don't believe it, why should I? So, and I do believe it. I see too many times how radio stations affect a local community. I mean, we did over 200 dates last year with local nonprofit organizations where we're the MC, we broadcasted live, we went to their auctions, and our people went out and interacted with the community. And a lot of these organizations don't have personnel that could do what we do. I mean, number one fear in the nation in the United States is speaking in public.
Mhm.
Number two is fear of destitution, meaning you're going to be broke. And number three is the fear of death. Go figure that one out. But it's people are afraid to speak in public, and we do it all the time. It doesn't even faze us. We don't even think about it. And so we can lend ourselves to a community, be attached to a community, and offer something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. And so it's one of those things we love to do, because in case you hadn't caught on, the whole building is filled with extroverts. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and one interesting thing too, I think, Bruce, is that you, as well as most radio stations that I've worked with, have people who are engaging. And if, you know, I used to be on with Barry on Thursdays in Minnesota 93, and just, you don't come in and say, I'm going to talk on the radio. You come in and say, I'm going to visit with Lisa. Right. They make you feel that comfortable. So it just happens to be that people are listening in on what you're talking about. I
actually think the best sounding radio, and this is how I've described it to Lisa for Talk of the Town, is think of it this way. You're sitting at the kitchen table and you're having coffee with your friends, and somebody plopped a mic down in the middle of the table. And then, oh, look, Trooper Andy walked in. And it just becomes this, it's like meeting at the coffee shop. My dad would go down to the coffee shop and he would meet with the guys on, like Thursday morning, and they'd have a conversation. Well, this was kind of like that, except it's broadcast. And there's a lot of folks. I mean, I didn't really realize how in-depth radio was until one day I moved in. This is down in the Wilmer area. We had moved to, started working out of a Spicer office, and we moved to this little town called Pennock, and moved into the house, and next door was Elfie. She had been living in this house for 50 years. Her husband built the house, and he had passed away, and the sister-in-law and brother-in-law who lived next door, they had passed away, and she was the only one left. And so Lori and I, my wife and I, we hit it off, and we were chatting with her, and I said, well, how do you pass the time? She goes, oh, I listen to the Twins every day. And I mean, the Twins were what gave her, and I'm not a sports guy, so I don't get it, but she listened to the Minnesota Twins like religion. And with 186 games in a year that we broadcast, there was always something to look forward to. So, but it's you get to know people, and you get to mark your time, and it gives you something to look forward to and fill your day. And I hadn't really thought of it that way, that people, it's that friendly voice, and it's nice to have. So.
And I would think during this time when so many people have been contained in their homes, that being able to hear a friendly voice every day was probably a lifesaver in some cases.
I will tell you, radio listenership is up around 25-26%. It is, because a lot of people I've heard some people say, well, I don't have the radio on at all. I used to listen at work. Well, keep in mind, 70% of us were still working and on time and sitting in the office, and now there's no customers. So you turn on the radio and you crank things up. But at home, I listen to almost no television. I struggle with television. I'm not a visual guy, and I don't sit around very well. And so I like to, this is a great story too. I have just bunches of these. So years ago, I wound up in Florida at a trade show, a radio trade show, and they had a futurist there. And this is a guy who looks at all of technology and says, here's what's about to happen. You need to know this. And he's talking to 3,000 radio guys. And he says, guys, you're being handed the world on a silver platter and you don't even know it. Radio is the only multitasking media. It is the only media that allows you, you can't watch TV while you drive a car. You cannot look at your cell phone, read, something on your cell phone while you're at work. A lot of employers basically say you leave it in the car. You don't even, you can't do that. You cannot read the newspaper while you're trying to make dinner. You can't, it's the only multitasking media. And I find I love radio because you can have it on, and I tend to listen on Alexa most of the time. I just have found that to be a treat. And by the way, if you're familiar with that technology at all, number one use of an Alexa device is to listen to a local radio station. So, it's very popular, and it's a lot of fun. So, what other questions? I feel like I'm rambling, sorry, but tell me, what questions do you guys have?
Well, I could pop up with another one. I feel like I'm monopolizing it a little bit, but I think the first time you and I met, Bruce, was at something that was put on by, I can't remember if it was the United Way or who it was, where it was a bunch of nonprofits were invited in to meet with representatives of the media.
That's right.
To find out how they could utilize, how the media and the nonprofits could work together to get the nonprofits' stories out there. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was wonderful, because everybody was there from the media to say, we need you folks to contact us.
It's really difficult because people have it in their heads, well, it's just one email or it's just one phone call. How many nonprofit organizations are in town?
Hundreds.
There are literally hundreds. And you may think, oh, it's only one email. I get an average of 100 to 150 email a day. And I could spend all day at my desk just clicking delete. So it's really difficult to sort things through and move things through, and still get the rest of your job done too. But I really appreciate it when there's a nonprofit that reaches out and says, hey, this is our special thing. This is what we're hoping to have. I even like it when they come with a possible solution, because even if I can't do that, it gives me a springboard to say, aha, here's what you're after. Here's, here's how we can help. And it is helpful. We try, we have to say no to some things. I mean, there are some things. Okay, here's a, like, so for example, we were asked at one point, could you broadcast this auction? Yeah, I mean, technically, flip the switch on, make her go. I'm telling you, it's horrible radio. Nobody's going to listen, and nobody will remember even if they did listen. It is not, I mean, radio is bad at a few things. Providing details, not very good at it. I mean, if you want, or seeing pictures, those sorts of things. If I'm going to shop for something, I want to do that online. I want to see, which is, by the way, we do have an online store. It's called the Big Deals online store. And so we do sell things. And so we will instead, 1 o'clock on Wednesdays, we have the Big Deals online show. And we basically say, hey, everybody, here's what's going on. Go over there. And that push of reference is an excellent way to do. You've got an intrusive media pushing to a reference media. And that 1-2, using them together is really powerful. So you have to use every media appropriately. When I say that, let me give you an example. You ever seen a billboard that looks like somebody tried to write a book on it, and you're driving by going, well, I wonder what that said. I mean, and it's when you have a billboard, you get 5 words, and 2 of them are probably the name of your business, Radio Mankato. I mean, so you really have 3 words. You have to use, I mean, a great example of a good use of a billboard, Radio Mankato, turn here, and an arrow, like, come find me, here's your trigger. But you have to use every media appropriately. But I kind of got off subject there. Sorry.
Anybody else have any other questions? Janice?
No, I moved here 3 years ago, so I'm not that all the radios.
Well, and I've only been here a little over a year. I really do think you'd like that surrounded by history thing, because I'm learning all kinds of stuff about our community that I'm just like, well, that's pretty neat. I heard another one today, and it wasn't on the air today, but it's a topic of what's going to be coming up, and I was like, wow, I had no idea. And there's all kinds of interesting things that have happened here. So
I've heard a few of them that have been on there, and it's been things that I'm like, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I've lived in this area all my life.
And those are and to me, that's some of the best stuff. I mean, where it's like, I've been here all this time and I had no idea. So, yeah. And so we're trying to uncover little by little, try some new things, and we're going to try other new things. And I will guarantee you some of them will fail. I would ask, I take phone calls all day long. And with 7 radio stations, I would love to tell you we're doing everything perfect all day long on every radio station. I probably take 5 to 10 phone calls a week of somebody saying, hey, I don't mean to be that guy, but I really want to talk to you about what happened on this station. And some of them are a big deal. And some of them are things like, I wish you had a different news. Like, I don't like ABC News. I wish you had CBS or Fox or whatever. And I'm, and I take those things into account when contracts come up. I mean, for the most part, we have contracts with companies like ABC. And so.
So then your radio stations you're just pulling in the ABC radio, the news, ABC News.
Right. For 5 minutes an hour.
Connected with ABC.
Okay, so ABC, so there are some things we do all in-house. And I do believe that even though we put the bulk of our focus on here's local things, we don't live in a bubble. We want to know, well, what did our president say, or what did happen in the world today? And if we don't also provide some of that information, it doesn't have to be tons and tons, but if we don't provide some of it, they'll go somewhere else to go find it. And
That's
so we want to provide, here's our local news or our national news coverage, and it's always top of the hour. It lasts about 5 minutes. And sometimes they'll carry it at the bottom of the hour. That might be if they're having a slower news day, but if we've got something local that we put on, we do that instead. But it's national news, Minnesota news, and local news. And from a news standpoint, those are the three big rocks. But then you also have national sports, you got Minnesota sports, and you got local sports. And you've got to have it really well rounded that you're covering all of those things. We do put more emphasis on the local, which kind of goes back to the podcast thing, Mike, that you were asking about. Name the podcast that talks about Mankato West sports or Loyola sports. Doesn't exist. Local radio still handles a lot of those local small things. And I'm not saying that there may be a podcast that does some of those things, but again, it's not instant. Here's what happened, last night, or even broadcasting the game, which is right now. This was something I was actually really, it was more out of desperation that we figured it out, but graduations got canceled this year. And it's heartbreaking because I just believe that these kids, there is they've done studies and they find out that when a child has that, like my grandkids are being potty trained, you're a big kid now, you've gone from this to this. And when you mark those steps in time that says you're growing up, it makes a difference. And when you tell an 18-year-old, you have graduated from high school, here is our ceremony, we make a big deal about it, they function as adults better, as opposed to sliding into adulthood and living in their parents' basement until they're in their mid-20s. So without the ability to have those ceremonies, it's like, well, what do you do? And so we started calling around very early on because we kind of saw this coming, that they weren't going to be able to have graduations. And we said, look, what if graduation sounded exactly like you were there? Just close your eyes and you hear it instead. And so we were able to, and some of them liked that idea and some of them hated that idea. And we let the schools, we did 6 different graduations, and we let the schools decide what do you want to do? But we hosted 5 of them on KTOE, and we put one of them on Hot 96.7. They wanted it to be music and fun and a parade music bed. And I'm like, okay, if that's what these high school seniors really want. And I did not get a chance to go to the parade because I was here, but our morning crews came back in and sat in with our afternoon guys, and they just made it into a party. And I guess it was a lot of fun. They really thought it was neat. So,
and I know you guys tracked the hurricane or whatever went up through midsection Ohio. Is that?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I don't know what you're saying.
I'm not sure who this is.
It was coming in through Janice.
Oh.
According to mine, anyway. Can you repeat the question? Or not.
That sounds like they're trying, but I can't hear it.
No, I don't hear it either. So anyway, so we try different things, and some of them are going to be awesome and some of them are going to fail. I really was pleased about how the graduation sounded and how that went. And, was it everybody's thing? No. My kids are all grown up. I wouldn't have listened. But if I had a high school senior and grandma and grandpa were in Montana somewhere, I would have shown them how they could listen in, and they would have been appreciative of that. So, all
right. Well, I tell you what, we are an hour 15 into it. So
sure.
I want to thank Bruce. I want to thank everybody for attending this one. We'll hopefully get more people to come to future ones, but I have been recording, so I will share this with those who said that they wanted to be here. And then